He shattered every heart that tried to care for him, until a quiet maid with eyes full of mercy made him remember what love was supposed to feel like. The house woke before the neighborhood knew there was light. It always did. The Hawthorne estate had its own dawn, a sterile glow blooming across motion sensors, floor lights throbbing awake, like a hospital corridor, security screens flipping from static to color. In the servants' corridor the air tasted like polish and worry. Tiled floor, gray-white, a metronome that taught you how to walk without being heard. In the kitchen, Chef Lila was already counting eggs. She counted them every morning, as if the number would keep her safe. The head housekeeper, Ms. Corinne, hovered with a tablet, her stylus tapping names like a roll call in a school that forgot children's voices matter. Miro, the driver, ironed his shirt in the pantry so the creases could pass inspection. He joked once that he was just ironing the fear out of the fabric. Nobody laughed. They were saving their breath for the day. On the wall beside the service elevator, a laminated schedule hung under a plexiglass cover. The rules were printed in 2 fonts, one calm, one legal. Return all keys to the lockbox. No perfume in guest zones. No personal calls within house Wi-Fi radius. No doors left ajar in proximity to family quarters unless immediate hazard or emergency. No eye contact with Hawthorne family after 8 p.m. unless spoken to. It struck new staff like superstition until they realized it was survival. Don't look up, Ms. Corinne reminded everyone, not because people forgot, but because reminders became armor. He's up. The boy. The not boy. 17, 6 feet, shoulders like he'd been taught to enter rooms sideways so he didn't knock paintings off the wall. The head of security called him Master Ethan with a brittle smile that had a warning baked in. The nannies called him nothing at all. They whispered the son, as if the house could hear nouns and punish you for specificity. He was on the staircase as the household unfurled, a white coiled spiral that seemed designed to make everyone below look small. He liked that. He liked angles. He sat 2 steps down from a landing, a water glass in his hand he didn't drink from, watching the staff the way children watch ants when they've just learned ants don't scream. There was no sound of him. That was the thing. Ethan didn't clatter, he didn't cough, he didn't stomp. He appeared like a thought you didn't ask for. Once the butler, Mr. Vale, who trained in hotels where they taught you to make footsteps into mist, walked into the foyer and saw the boy sitting on the banister like a gargoyle. Their eyes met at a distance. Mr. Vale said, "Good morning, sir," and the boy smiled. It was not kindness. It was cataloging. 3 days before, the last nanny had left with her jaw set so hard the muscles trembled. She didn't file a complaint. No one filed complaints here. Complaints require names, and the contract said names are Hawthorne property. On her way out, she left a sweater snagged beneath the railing, a pale blue loop, like a question mark, waiting for a sentence. Facilities placed it in a clear bag marked unclaimed. The bag sat on the marble island of the staff kitchen, a little balloon of ghost. They said Ethan hadn't been born cruel. That's what they tell themselves when they need a reason to clock back in. They say something happened when he was small, something with cameras or school or a private tutor who believed discipline meant shaping a child into a blade. They say his mother left because the house grew teeth and offered to buy her first. They say his father raised him like a product. Hawthorne Solutions, next generation, smiling in photos with a hand on the boy's shoulder that looked like possession. New arrival today, Ms. Corinne said, not raising her eyes from the tablet. Agency promised resilience. No perfume, no accessories, no hugs. We keep it procedural. Chef Lila stared into a pot of water, like it could calm. What name? Amina. The name floated into the corridor where Miro folded hand towels like flags. Country. Ms. Curran's mouth barely twitched. Country is none of our business. This house makes everything our business, Miro murmured, but not loud enough to travel. At 9, the gates let a black sedan slip through like it had swallowed the morning. Mr. Vale straightened his tie and stepped out to receive. Every arrival was theater, the doorman, the nod, the step back, the measured welcome. He opened the rear door, and she emerged. A navy headwrap wrapped in clean lines across her crown. A plain press blouse. Practical shoes that promised mileage instead of status. She held her own small bag, no suitcase, and her back was straight without being stiff. Calm without being apathetic. She looked at the house not like a tourist, not with hunger, not with fear. She looked at it like she was prepared to meet it with both hands open. Amina, Mr. Vale said, voice softening around the name. He couldn't help it. It was a name that asked you to speak kindly. Welcome. Thank you. She glanced at the lawn that had been trimmed into geometry. Your hedges are frightened. Mr. Vale's jaw almost laughed. He hit it quick. This way. From the top of the staircase, Ethan watched. He didn't smile at new staff. He didn't even register them. But when Amina lifted her eyes to the flight of stairs, not to him, to the shape of a rail, to the cut of the turn, he saw something like empathy pass through her face, as if the house were a creature with a hurting spine. He felt heat at the base of his throat and didn't recognize it. He had learned his body was a tool, not a language. He stood slow. When Amina crossed the foyer, the light from the skylight made a path across the marble, like an invitation no one ever accepts. She stepped into it because it was there. He moved sideways, as if to block, then didn't. The choreography wrote itself. He let her pass within arm's length. She smelled like laundry hung in actual sun, a simple clean that had nothing to prove. His mouth surprised him. It moved. A curve. It was quick, involuntary. A smile. Small, like a child's secret. Then gone. Below, 3 maids watched from a corridor, their faces turning into maps of fear and hope. He smiled. One whispered, as if saying it wrong would undo the magic. At her. Then God help her, the older one muttered, and crossed herself with a movement so fast it looked like a tick. Orientation happened in an office with glass walls. Glass walls meant you could see inside but couldn't hear. Control with transparency. Amina sat, hands folded, while Ms. Corinne clicked through slides. House zones. Panic codes. Fridge inventory. The slide that listed boundaries, no opinions. No emotional investment. No parting gifts. If the family offers charity, decline twice and accept once on camera. If the son initiates conversation after hours, log it. If the son uses the panic phrase, silver thread, leave the room and notify security. Silver thread. Amina asked. Family-specific code, Ms. Corinne said. It means he feels threatened. Amina let the words stretch between them. Feels. We don't discuss feelings, Ms. Corinne said. We document and respond. Amina nodded. Understood. You're not a nanny exactly, Ms. Corinne continued. The agency listed you as house support, but the father made a note that he wants durability. He does not want mothering. I don't offer what's not wanted, Amina said. I offer what's needed. Ms. Corinne looked up for the first time, measuring something not on her form. We run on rules here. But if you need an ally, find Mr. Vale. He knows when doors breathe. Amina had worked in other houses. Not like this. She had worked in small places where grief was loud and ordinary, where children threw clothes and then cried into your apron because they meant the shirt, not the rage. She had worked in homes where pay arrived late and praise arrived never. She had slept in a room with 2 other women while saving for a visa extension. She had watched a friend lose her temper with a rich boy and lose her job in a single sentence she wasn't allowed to defend. She had learned to let anger dissolve into competence, which is not the same as surrender. Her phone buzzed once in her bag. She didn't reach for it. In this interview, reaching for a phone is a declaration of poverty. It says, someone needs me. Poverty is not allowed to be urgent in rooms like these. Mr. Vale showed her to the staff dining room. We eat in rotations, he said. You're assigned to afternoons this week. If you need tea, ask Chef Lila. She pretends to be busy to save herself from conversation, but she likes to put things in mugs that calm storms. Amina smiled with her eyes. What if storms don't want to be calmed? Then she'll at least make them fragrant. He stopped at a doorway as they passed, lowering his voice. And there's one more rule we don't print. Don't believe the first version of anyone who lives upstairs. Amina didn't ask for clarification. She knew the economy of warnings. Take the seed and plant it later, if needed. She took her first round through the family wing, with another maid as guide. A soft knock, a measured entry, the pause before touching objects that cost more than a month of anyone's life. The mother's suite was a museum. They kept it staged as if emptiness could be undone by staging. A row of dresses like a prayer you hang, instead of speak. A childhood photo of Ethan in a silver frame. He was 5, cheeks round, fingers stained with marker, a dinosaur under his arm. The picture was turned slightly toward the wall, as if the room had become shy of the past. Don't adjust the frame, the other maid whispered. He notices. In the library, the air smelled like old stories and new money. Amina dusted spines without reading titles, a discipline she'd perfected. If you read yourself into the shelves will read you back and decide you don't belong. She wiped a little dish that held smooth river stones. 3 stones, each one polished by time and touch. It struck her that someone had gathered these before there was a mansion, before there were rules, and wanted to keep a piece of river near. At noon, Amina was assigned to the upstairs hall outside Ethan's room. Not inside, outside. Just present. Some days the presence is the job, she'd been told. Presence without interference. Presence without invitation. The door was half closed. She stood at the console table, with her cleaning caddy, rearranging nothing, so gently it looked like air was doing it. The door opened. Ethan stepped out in dark slacks and a white shirt that had been steamed to erase humanity. He didn't look at her. He looked through her, and then back at her, as if correcting a miscalculation. "Name," he said, not as question but as test. "Amina," she answered. "Good afternoon." He didn't respond. He walked to the landing and stared at the chandelier, the way one might stare at a beetle pinned under glass. "Don't spray anything with citrus in this hallway. It makes the crystal cloud." He didn't wait for acknowledgement. "I won't." He turned his head slightly, then turned it back. "Do you cook?" "Sometimes. We have chef. I'm not here to replace anyone." He blinked like he'd been surprised by a softness he didn't order. "Don't stand too close to the railing," he said, not unkind. "The light is harsh there." "Thank you." He walked down the stairs without touching the polished handrail. The air shifted when he moved, a pocket of temperature his body made without consent. At the bottom, Mr. Hawthorne himself appeared, voice booming without volume. He had that trick, authority so practiced it didn't need decibels. "You're late," he said to his son, though his watch said otherwise. "Boardroom is at 2. Eyes open." Ethan glanced at his father with a face he'd hardened before his first adult suit. "They're open," he said, and for a second, Amina saw a child behind the grown expression. Then he was gone. The afternoon stretched. Amina learned the house by its sounds. A door in the east corridor had a loose strike plate that clicked like a tiny metronome when the air conditioning ran. The freezer in the pantry made a whistle on even hours. The security office's printer had a hiccup that made it cough twice, and then grind, a complaint that had no audience. The house remembered every movement and repeated it to anyone who knew how to listen. At 4, a hush fell down the main hallway. This was how you knew Mr. Hawthorne had moved into a different mood, the kind that required surfaces to shine like apologies. The hush meant someone had been called to an office. The hush meant staff moved slower, not to draw attention, but to give anger more air, so it would thin. A young maid named Raina brushed past Amina and whispered, "He made Ms. Park cry last week." "The nanny?" She pretended she had allergies. Raina spoke fast, like confessions can outrun cameras. She said he would stand in the doorway while she tried to do his laundry and tell her the spin cycle was wrong. At 2 a.m., he'd mark the detergent level and then accuse her of stealing the rest for her family. "She doesn't even have a washing machine at home." "I'm sorry," Amina said. "He told another one to read aloud in French because he liked to hear mistakes," Raina continued, as if cataloging wrongs made them less powerful. "He likes to find cracked places in people and tap them." "And you?" Amina asked. "What cracked place does he think you have?" Raina's eyes darted. "Hope," she said, half smiling like a hurt. "He taps that a lot." At 5, Ethan returned from whatever lesson the world had taught him that day. His tie was in his pocket. His hair was perfect in a way that defied weather. He stopped in the hallway again. Amina stood at the console, wiping a frame that had no dust. She felt his pause without turning. "You're still here," he said. "Yes. Most people flinch when I open doors." "My grandmother used to open doors by singing," Amina said. "I grew up expecting openings to be music." He didn't know what to do with that. He defaulted to strategy. "You're not a nanny," he said, trying to categorize. "No, you're not staff I've seen before." "No, so why did my father tell security to give you the family Wi-Fi code?" He leaned, almost curious. "Because I told him I keep my promises better when I can send a text to my son saying I'll be home late. It keeps me from turning fear into mistakes." The word son hung in the air between them. Ethan did not move. His pupils shifted. He looked at her fully now, not through her, not at her uniform. He looked into the steadiness that hadn't been startled by his wealth. "How old?" he asked before he could tell himself not to. 12. He smirked with half his mouth, a habit that disguised emotion as charm. Then you already know how to be disappointed. Amina didn't step toward him. She didn't try to rescue him from his line. Disappointment is heavy when you carry it alone, she said. Lighter when someone holds the other handle. He stared, a flicker of conflict crossing his face, like cloud across marble. People hold handles for money here, he said. Not for weight. Some weights don't pay well, Amina said. They still need lifting. That night, the kitchen lights were softer. Chef Lila brewed tea that smelled like the inside of a storybook. Miro told a joke that made Mr. Vale actually smile without apology. The storm had not passed, storms never do here, but had moved into another room. Ethan stood in the doorway to the staff kitchen because boundaries gave him thrills. He expected the room to flinch. No one did, but voices dimmed. He watched Amina stir her tea with a stainless spoon that clinked a gentle rhythm. He waited to be acknowledged. No one granted him that gift. He had to ask for it. He hated asking. He did it anyway. Do dishes complain when you take your time with them? He said, the cadence recalling a line she'd offered earlier. Not once, she said without turning, but there was warmth. She finished the circle of stirring and set the spoon down like punctuation. Do sons? He almost laughed. It startled him, how close the sound was to the surface. Sometimes, he said, voice lower. They're trained to complain silently. I don't read silence as consent, Amina said. Where I come from, silence is often survival. He leaned on the door jamb, forgetting to perform the posture that cost thousands in tutors and tennis coaches. Where do you come from? A place where people knock before entering, she said simply. He blinked, and then, for the second time that day, he smiled. No audience, no trophy, just a human mouth doing what it does when it recognizes something soft and true. It was smaller than the first, and it lasted longer. He didn't stay. He left without a word, like a boy who discovered a path behind a hedge and didn't want anyone to see him use it yet. Upstairs, the house dimmed to its blue lights. Cameras hummed. Air vents sang their mechanical lullabies. Amina finished stacking plates, wiped the steel like she was polishing a mirror that had forgotten how to show faces kindly. Ms. Corinne collected the day's reports, flipping pages with her stylus like a prayer wheel. She paused at the log where Amina had written in neat block letters, Resident-initiated conversation 1703, neutral tone, no instructions given, no distress observed. Offered to consider hallway light angles. She did not write about the smile. Smiles don't go in reports. They go in memory. On her way to the staff quarters, Amina stopped by the unclaimed items shelf. The pale blue sweater bag was there, stuffed but weightless. She touched the plastic lightly. What have you seen? She whispered to a sweater that once warmed someone who didn't know how to leave without leaving pieces of herself behind. In the room she would sleep in, 4 bunks, 2 occupied. The lamp cast a gold circle onto the page of a notebook she carried. She wrote the date. She wrote 3 lines. House breathes. Boy observes. Compassion invited once, declined twice, accepted later. She closed the book and lay down on the mattress that was too firm for tenderness. She thought of her son, his front tooth chip a little because life is not careful. She thought of sending him a good-night voice message, even if the house ate signal. She pictured him laughing at a joke she'd tell about the elevator that sighed, like an old uncle. She pictured him asking if she felt safe, and she pictured herself answering in that way mothers do when the truth is not helpful. I am surrounded by people who do their best. Ethan did not sleep. He walked the house like a shadow that had learned to walk without a body. He stood in the doorway to the library and stared at the river stones like they could remember who had collected them and why that mattered. He touched the frame, with the photograph turned toward the wall. He counted his heartbeats for 30 seconds and counted the difference between hearing and listening. He tried to remember a lullaby. He could not. He sat on the floor of his room with his back against the bed. He recognized the feeling clinging to the inside of his ribs. It was not sweetness. It was not guilt. It was not fear. It was the memory of being regarded without agenda. It made him feel sick and safe at the same time. It made him want to do something destructive just to prove to himself that tenderness is an angle he can break. He stood, pulled open his closet door, and reached up to a high shelf where he kept a small box the color of deliberately chosen secrets. Inside was a string bracelet, cheap, orange, knotted badly by small fingers. He had worn it when he was 7 because someone told him it would bring luck. It had broken, and he had kept the pieces because that is what children do when they learn loss before language for it. He closed the box and placed it back where it belonged. He did not tell the cameras that he had touched it. He did not tell the house. He turned off his bedroom light and stood in darkness until his eyes corrected. From the corner of the ceiling, a tiny blue power indicator blinked like a low heartbeat. He imagined it was a star. He imagined if the star could speak, it would tell him to be small for a minute, to be soft. He hated the idea and wanted it at the same time. In the morning, the house would repeat. The laminated schedule would reflect fluorescence, and someone would remark that the recycled air felt sharper today, like the house had teeth. Mr. Hawthorne would measure time with his eyebrows and his watch. Ms. Corinne would say, "We adjust," and Chef Lila would pretend not to hear so she could keep one corner of the house safe from human phrases that scraped. But the repetition would not be exact. It never is after one honest smile. Something in the pattern had been moved a quarter inch, unnoticeable to the cameras, undeniable to the soul. Ethan would pause again at the top of the stairs, not because he wanted to perform power, but because he had an impulse to check the light on the railing where he'd warned her to stand. He would not call it care. He would call it calibration. He would calibrate himself to the presence of a person who did not ask him to be anything other than a boy who knocked. And in a house that trained everyone to document, to log, to report, one thing would remain unlogged. That Mercy had entered like steam rising from a mug no one had ordered and made the air kinder to breathe. Morning came on silent feet and found Ethan already dressed, hair obedient, the surface of him so composed it felt like a threat. He had not slept, but he knew how to fake rest. Wealth teaches a perfected jawline the way poverty teaches posture. In the mirror, the boy adjusted his cuff and thought of nothing on purpose. When the mind threatens to speak, you occupy the hands. Downstairs, the house resumed its ritual. The smell of toasted bread that nobody ate. The whisper laugh of the espresso machine. A clock blinking 6 o'clock like a metronome that had never learned a different song. Amina tied her head wrap at the sink, thumb and forefinger pinching the fold, as if listening for the fabric's consent. She moved through rooms the way prayer moves through memory, steady, unurgent, refusing panic even when panic insists it's urgent. Day 2, Miro said from the pantry doorway. This is when the house tries to teach you who it thinks it is. And who does it think it is? Amina asked, checking the inventory without touching the jars. God, he said cheerfully, and lifted 2 crates as if the answer were a joke that had paid his rent. The intercom crackled. A voice with money in its vowels said, "Staff meeting. Family room. Now." The family room meant performative casual, a couch no one sat on, a television that played news without volume, a coffee table with curated books about cities the family visited only by helicopter. They gathered. Ms. Corinne took attendance. Mr. Vale stood with his hands folded behind his back, waiting for the moment leadership chooses to enter, because entrances are their own currency here. Mr. Hawthorne walked in without looking left or right, trailed by a woman in a black suit whose smile was a business card. "This is Celine," Mr. Hawthorne said, not bothering with last names. "Our new communications consultant." Everyone knew what communications meant. It meant some truth had escaped its kennel. "There's chatter online," Celine said, voice even. An anonymous account claiming labor violations, harassment by a family member, unsafe work environment. "We anticipate press outreach in the next 24 to 48 hours. We will handle it. You will not. You will not engage. You will not respond. You will not post." She held up a folder. "You will, however, reaffirm your confidentiality agreements with this updated addendum. It clarifies expectations and increases your discretionary bonus for compliance." Questions. No one ever had questions in this room. Questions are a liability, even when they smell like hope. "Good," Celine said. "Sign with Ms. Corinne. Return to your stations. And remember, nothing you feel is more important than what we can prove." Amina accepted the folder without opening it. She slid it into the crook of her arm the way one carries a delicate secret you don't want to drop and don't want to keep. In the hallway, Raina whispered, "The account posted at 3 a.m. The comments are a bonfire." "Whose voice is it?" Amina asked. "Sounds like Ms. Park," Raina said. "But it's anonymous, so we pretend we can't hear a voice we know. That's the game." Amina did not say she does not play games when the stakes are other people's throats. She smiled like a person who is too tired to argue with theater. By 9, Ethan emerged again at the top of the stairs. He paused exactly where he had paused yesterday. The house is a compass, and he is its needle. He scanned the room with a blankness that felt like an X-ray. Amina stood where she had stood yesterday, and at the sight of her, something in his face softened as if a muscle remembered it could be used for something other than bracing. He descended. Midway down, he said without looking at her, "Did you sign it?" "Not yet." He stopped on the third step and turned. "You will." "I will read it," she said, "and decide if my soul can carry the weight without limping." "Souls don't limp," he said, and his mouth twitched, trying to make it a joke. "They do," she said. "They just do it in places cameras don't see." He stared at her longer than was polite, longer than was legal for some kind of transaction neither of them could name. Then he adjusted his cuff and continued downward into the gravity of his father. Celine's team brought in ring lights and neutrality. They set up in the study with the portrait of the founding Hawthorne glaring down, the kind of oil painting where the eyes follow you because money pays for that trick. A camera operator asked for a test shot. Mr. Hawthorne sat in an armchair that made executives look softer. The light kissed his jaw. He said, "Let's tell the truth that lives on our side." He smiled into the lens like a man in a courtroom who knows the judge's golf handicap. Ethan hovered in the doorway. Celine saw him, weighed him, filed him. "You'll speak as well," she said lightly. "Just a few lines about respect for staff and your commitment to a safe home." "My commitment," Ethan said, and the word came out either curious or dangerous. "To a safe home." Celine kept her smile, pressed brighter. "You have the most to gain by telling your own story." "I don't have a story," he said. "I have lines." Celine glanced at Mr. Hawthorne, reading the weather. "We'll schedule you later." In the staff kitchen, Chef Lila slid a cup of tea across the counter toward Amina, without commentary. The mug was warm in the way living hands are warm. "You'll be tempted to sign," Chef said, stirring a pot she didn't need to stir. "Not because it's right, but because tired people make bargains that don't fit them." "I don't bargain with sleep," Amina said. "I bargain with silence. And silence is a poor negotiator." "Don't get yourself fired," Mr. Vale murmured, stepping into the doorway with a stack of linen like a prop. "The house is allergic to courage. It breaks out in firings." Amina didn't answer. She opened the folder. She read, "Page 1, page 2, page 3. Her eyes slowed at a paragraph that seemed to tilt the room. It wasn't new. It was precise. "Employees may not disclose observations, interactions, or impressions of family members that could reasonably be interpreted as criticism, judgment, or negative characterization. Employees must report any staff member who expresses concern about working conditions to the house liaison for immediate retraining. Retaliation for failure to report will be considered cause for termination." "Impressions," she repeated quietly. "Feelings outlawed in triplicate." "They prefer furniture to witnesses," Miro said. "Furniture doesn't write." Amina looked up. "Furniture remembers." "Don't say that too loud," Mr. Vale said dryly. "They'll replace the chairs." At noon, Amina was assigned to the study while the film crew pivoted. She dusted a shelf that had been dusted already. Ethan drifted in like a coincidence. He walked to the window and watched the lawn exist. It's a talent, staring at nothing until it looks like control. "What did you decide?" he asked, as if continuing a conversation they were not having in public. "I decided to keep my job honestly," she said. "That isn't a decision," he said. "It's a testimony." She smiled with one corner. "Then I decided to testify quietly." He turned from the window. "Quiet doesn't carry here." "Then it has to be heavier." He looked at her the way you look at a word you've read before but never heard pronounced. He opened his mouth, closed it. "Do you have a plan, Amina?" "Bread, school, rent, refill my son's asthma inhaler, send money to my mother's sister who thinks I am richer than I am. That plan." "I meant a plan for here." "Here isn't a plan," she said. "It's a test." He almost laughed again and hated himself for liking it. Crowds were setting up outside the gates now, small but visible, people who smell scandal like rain. Cell phones glimmered like insects. Celine's assistant paced with a clipboard, transmitting urgency by walking faster than decorum. After lunch, a delivery arrived for boxes labeled guest welcome kits. Celine's idea: care packages for staff to show on camera, candles, chocolate, branded blankets. Ms. Corinne told Raina to distribute. Stage them in the lounge. Cameras at 3. Raina lifted a blanket. It was soft. Imagine being so rich you try to bribe dignity with fleece, she muttered, then flinched at her own voice and shoved the softness back into cardboard. Amina took her assign kit and set it on the shelf. She did not unwrap it. Gifts are sometimes traps if they demand a smile as part of the receipt. At 2, the house practiced contrition. Celine positioned Staff along a couch. Mr. Hawthorne perched on the arm like a benevolent eagle. "We appreciate our team," he said into the lens. "They are family." The word family skittered across the floor and hid under a chair. "Let's try again," Celine said pleasantly. "Less boardroom, more heart." "Heart is a muscle," Mr. Hawthorne said. "It learns through repetition." He smiled at a point somewhere past the camera. "We're proud of our standards." Ethan appeared late, jacket off, tie open. He was beautiful in a way that made shame turn away, and cameras love that. Celine handed him a card. He glanced. He recited with surgical precision, "I respect the people who keep this home safe and functional. Anyone who works here knows we are committed to their well-being." He didn't blink on the word committed. He'd been trained. "Give me one more," Celine said, gently pressing. "Something human. Maybe address the rumors by showing how grateful you are." Ethan inhaled. He looked not at the lens, but a fraction to the left, at a reflection of himself in the cabinet glass. "I grew up with Staff," he said. "They've always been here." His mouth flattened at his own words, but he continued, "I know what it costs to make a house run." Celine nodded, pleased. "Good, good. A little more warmth on costs." He delivered the line again, warmer by 1 degree. It read as sincerity if your captioning was off. When the cameras were packed and the ring lights unplugged, when Celine had harvested enough footage to cut into a confession without sin, the house exhaled. "Mr. Hawthorne dismissed everyone with a smile that meant go, but don't forget I am the weather." He turned to his son. "Dinner with the Blackstones at 7. Wear the blue jacket. They like their wealth with navy." "I have homework," Ethan said, watching his father's face for the sport of watching a storm form. "Your life is homework," his father replied, bored. "Learn your lines." Amina was in the corridor outside, rearranging a floral arrangement that smelled like compliance. As father and son crossed the hall, Mr. Hawthorne registered her as one registers an exit sign. He nodded in that way that blesses and dismisses the same moment. "New." "Amina," she said. "Good," he said, like a man evaluating luggage. "Stay." He vanished into an office. The door clicked. Silence's temperature dropped 5 degrees. Ethan lingered. "He thinks I'm a lamp," Amina said softly. "He thinks I'm a mirror," Ethan said. "We're both forced to reflect his taste." "Then we can choose what angle," she said. He stared at her, a long, slow look that might have been gratitude if gratitude in this house wasn't illegal without supervision. In the late afternoon, a small event cracked the smoothness. Raina, rushing, bumped the console table. The vase tipped, water sloshed, a fast, glittering line racing toward the edge. Amina caught it with a cloth before it touched the floor. She steadied the vase with one hand, saved the day with a gesture so small the cameras yawned. "I'm sorry," Raina whispered, cheeks hot with fear. "They'll make it a thing." "They don't have to know it happened," Amina said. "It didn't." "But the water dried," Amina said, and held the wet cloth like a flag that needed hiding. Mr. Vale appeared at the end of the hall, as if conjured by crises. He took in the scene with one glance, then stepped back to block the security camera's view with his shoulder, while Amina wrung the cloth into a potted plant that had been dying of underwatering but flourishing in indifference. The plant sighed in green. "You didn't see me," Raina whispered to the plant. "You didn't see you," Amina corrected gently. Sometimes survival is also forgetting in the right direction. Word of a reporter at the gate reached them as gossip does, by tone before content. The gatehouse called the office. The office called Celine. The house adjusted its spine. Ethan watched from the balcony. He could see the reporter's notebook, the way she didn't hold it up like a weapon, the way she waited like patience is a tactic. "Do we let her in?" Celine asked Mr. Hawthorne. "We let in what we can bury," he said. "We leave out what can climb." Ethan's phone buzzed with a message from a number that used to know him at 12, at 14, at 15. Boarding school. A friend who had remained an accomplice out of habit. The text was a link. The anonymous account had posted a new paragraph. "The boy upstairs plays cruelty like a piano his father bought. He doesn't know another instrument. Teach him." The sentence sat with him like a teacher waiting for an answer you're not ready to give. Flashback comes uninvited when present refuses to negotiate. Ethan was 8 again, sitting in a chair too straight for a child, hands pressed flat to thighs. The tutor, Dr. Kellen, adjusting wire-rimmed glasses. Control is love, Dr. Kellen said, calm as lemon water. When you control your environment, you make it safe for the people you care about. People who can't be controlled don't want safety. The boy had nodded because nodding was the only way to end sentence. Later, he would take the dinosaur from his shelf and twist its head until it squeaked, then cry because the squeak sounded like giving in. In the present, Amina took a moment in the laundry room where the machines drummed like distant feet. She pulled out a basket of towels and pressed her face into them. Warmth is a drug. It reminded her of Malik, the weight of his head on her arm when he was small, and believed wrists were pillows. She took out her phone and recorded a message. Habibi, I am fine. The house is big, but your laughter still fills my ears. Drink water. Be good. I'll send money Friday. Remember, bravery is not shouting. It's not lying when it's easier. She sent it into the world where signals find their way through money's walls when love insists. When she returned to the corridor, Celine was waiting. The consultant's smile remained immaculate. Amina, she said, may I? You may, Amina said, because politeness is cheap and purchase orders are expensive. We're adding a clause to the addendum, Celine said, holding a single sheet. A specific non-disparagement regarding the son. Some of the staff have strong opinions. We don't want them to feel policed. We want them to feel guided. Guided toward silence, Amina said. Guided toward professionalism, Celine corrected, light and quick. You seem reasonable. You'll understand why families with high visibility require extra clarity. I understand visibility, Amina said. I also understand shadows. The men who live in them are not always the ones who cannot afford light. Celine's eyes cooled a degree. You like your job? I like paying rent, Amina said. Then sign, Celine replied, and handed over a pen that was heavier than a threat. Amina took the paper. She read. She looked at the line where she was meant to bind her throat. She thought of Malik's inhaler. She thought of Ms. Park's sweater in a plastic bag. She thought of her mother's sister's voice asking about America, like it was a casino where the drinks come free if you smile enough. She thought of the boy who smiled twice in 2 days like a storm, learning how to open the window without breaking the glass. No, she said softly, to her own surprise, to no one's surprise, to everyone's future. Celine kept smiling as if the word was a fly that would leave if ignored. Pardon. I will not sign a clause that punishes me for feeling and seeing, Amina said. I will sign that I will not lie. I will sign that I will protect privacy. I will not sign that I will be furniture. Celine's smile thinned. I appreciate candor. It simplifies HR. We'll speak to Mr. Hawthorne. Please do, Amina said, and her voice did not tremble because she had already spent her trembling on other altars. Ethan had heard the last lines. He had not meant to. He had been standing at the end of the hall, in that limbo where presence can still claim accident. He felt a heat along his sternum that had no name they would approve on a questionnaire. He stepped forward into visibility. It's fine, he said to Celine, casual as a shrug that threatened an avalanche. She doesn't have to sign. Celine turned, calculated. It's not for her. It's for us. She is us, he said, an error or revolution. She lives here more than I do. Celine's eyes flicked to the office door, calculating the angle of paternal wrath. Let's not improvise policy in the hall, Ethan. Let's, he said, and his mouth smiled without asking his father. A policy that requires people to tell stories that make us comfortable is not protection. It's propaganda. Big word, Celine said lightly. Maybe save it for college applications. He looked at Amina then. He didn't ask for help. He asked for witness. She stays, he said, and the words felt like stepping onto a floor. He hadn't had to check for creaks. Celine said nothing for a stretch long enough to plant a season. Then she changed tactics, honeying the air. Of course she stays, she said. We wouldn't fire someone for integrity. We'll adapt. She took back the paper. I'll revise the language. She left. The hall breathed. Ethan didn't move for a beat. Neither did Amina. Finally, he said, You just made my life more complicated. Complicated isn't worse, she said. It's just honest. Honesty is expensive, he said. So is pretending, she said. But the payments come due, in your bones. He looked like he wanted to answer, then chose a different path, quiet. He stepped back. "You remind me of something," he said, fumbling in a language without a dictionary. "It makes me angry." "Yes," she said. "That's the beginning of healing." He breathed out a laugh that wasn't funny. "That's what they say in rehab." "I say it in kitchens," she said, closer to the fire. He left again, but slower. A boy practicing exit wounds without blood. At 6:45, the Blackstones' car arrived with a hush that matched their money. Dinner meant choreography. Silverware aligned so exactly the knives could perform surgery, napkins folded into birds that don't fly. Amina watched from the periphery and learned the steps of a ballet she had no desire to dance. She hovered near the doorway when the men laughed at something like victory, and the women smiled at a pitch you use when you have trained your face to be less expensive than your bag. In the middle of the performance, Mr. Hawthorne's phone lit with a message that turned his face the color of litigation. He stood, excused himself, left a vacuum meant to show how important he is. The guests filled it with compliments. Compliments are plaster here. Ethan stayed. He poured wine for a woman who looked at him like an asset wearing a boy's suit. He smiled because smiling is currency in rooms where money plays dress-up. After dessert, Ethan slipped away. He found Amina in the dim of the side corridor where the house removes its makeup. He leaned against the wall with the care of someone who has never had to fear what walls do to backs. "Tell me a story," he said, abrupt, like a child bargaining for bedtime. "About what?" "About how you didn't become ruthless." She considered him. "I watched adults drop cruelty like coins into jars, and I realized one day the jar becomes heavy enough to drag your arm when you walk. I wanted to keep my arms free." "Was there an adult who wasn't cruel?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "A woman who baked bread for neighbors she did not like because she decided hunger mattered more than taste." "And she was your mother?" "No," Amina said. "She was my neighbor. My mother didn't like her. She still ate the bread." "A hypocrite," he said, quick with the label. "A human," she corrected. He slid down the wall until he sat on the floor, long legs bent like a comma. "My father thinks kindness weakens knees." "Kindness strengthens the back," she said. "Knees bend either way." He rubbed at his jaw as if wiping off a mask. "He's going to be furious about the claws." "He can be," she said. "Fury is free." "Not here," he said, almost smiling. "Here everything is invoiced." From the dining room, a toast rose and fell. Laughter like champagne, bubbling to hide the taste of something flat. Later, when the guests left with coats that made winter applaud, when the caterers packed absence into bins, when Celine sent one last email that sounded like an apology pretending to be instruction, the house tried to pretend it didn't remember the day. Houses prefer repetition to narrative. Narrative makes responsibility. Amina stood alone in the foyer and looked up at the chandelier. She stepped where the light was harsh and felt its honesty on her skin. Ethan appeared at the top of the stairs, looked down at her, standing exactly where he had warned her not to. "You're in the light," he said, like a weather report. "You told me not to be," she said, and did not move. He descended 3 steps and stopped. "I wanted to protect you from discomfort." "I don't want you to protect me from truth," she said. "I want you to protect me from lies." He took 2 more steps without deciding to. "He'll come for you." "Then he'll have to meet me," she said. "Not my fear." He reached the bottom step and didn't step off. The threshold is a teacher. He hovered there, a prince who doesn't trust the ground. "Do you think I can be different?" "I think you already are," she said. "You just haven't decided to live like it." He swallowed like the air had edges. "And if I don't decide?" "Then I will be kind to you anyway," she said, "because my kindness is mine, not yours." He breathed out, not quite a sigh, not quite a sob. "Teach me," he said, so low the cameras couldn't pretend they heard. "I can't," she said, "but you can learn." "How?" "Start with one unperformed apology. Say it where no one is grading you." He nodded once, like you nod to yourself when you are both the teacher and the student. He stepped off the last step. It made a sound the house hadn't heard from his feet in years, weight admitting itself. He walked past her, stopped, turned back. "Thank you," he said. It wasn't the apology, but it was oxygen. She watched him go. She closed her eyes. For a moment, she saw Malik's face, as if the chandelier light were his morning sun. She whispered, "I am learning too," into a house that pretended not to listen. In the staff quarters, Reyna showed Amina her phone. The anonymous account posted again. A thread of words that felt like a hand held out across an ocean. He smiled at the black Maid today. Not mockery. Not conquest. The first smile I believed. Maybe mercy can survive in glass. Amina stared at the screen. Ms. Park, she said gently to the air, the sweater, the plastic bag, to the aches stored in rooms that forgot how to store tenderness. Rest your throat. We'll carry it now. She put her phone away. She took the addendum. She wrote on the bottom in neat, small letters, I will not disparage. I will not lie. I will not pretend. She signed her name beside those 3 sentences instead of the ones offered. She slid the paper under Miss Corinne's door like a quiet revolution. Upstairs, Ethan sat at his desk. The box with the orange string bracelet rested beside his keyboard like an accusation. He opened it and took the broken string into his palm. He pressed it there until the roughness imprinted skin. He whispered to no one, I'm sorry. It sounded like a boy scraping rust off a bell. The bell made a sound so small only he could hear it. The house marked the hour with a blink of security light, blue, like a heartbeat practicing. Outside, a reporter's car idled, waiting for a version of truth that would open the gate. Inside, a man counted his bonuses, a consultant edited sincerity, a driver hung his shirt for tomorrow, a chef set a dough to rise, a butler aligned forks as if symmetry could prevent harm, a maid texted a friend to answer a prayer with a joke, and a boy held a broken string and tried to remember how to be human with no audience. In the quiet, after all the noise, Amina lay in her bunk and listened to the house breathe. She prayed without telling God what to do. She asked only for strength to stand in the light where it was harsh. She asked for eyes to recognize mercy when it arrived looking like a confused child in a rich boy's skin. She asked for the courage to refuse the wrong paper, the wrong silence, the wrong protection. And before sleep found her, she smiled because somewhere in the house, she could feel another smile answer hers. Not mockery, not conquest, just a small, stubborn beginning. The day learned a new sound, the thin, electric whisper of a rumor leaving the gate and not asking permission to come back. It was in the air like static, lifting the hair on the arms of anyone who had ever been told to keep their head down. The anonymous account had posted again during the night, and by breakfast the comments were a river carving the mansion's cliff. Ethan watched from the balcony. He could see himself in the reflection of the upstairs window, a boy inside glass pretending not to understand the language of consequences. He almost pressed his palm to the glass, as if he could touch his reflection into a different person. He didn't. He walked the hall and counted doors he had opened without knocking, doors he had avoided because they were padlocked with his father's rules. At the end of the corridor, one door was ajar, office lights slicing into shadow. He heard voices, Celine's arithmetic calm, Mr. Hawthorne's patience like a fuse. We issue a statement at 10, Celine was saying. Compassion, accountability, corrective action. We get ahead of it. We invite a reporter to do a controlled tour. Which reporter? Mr. Hawthorne asked without looking up from his phone. Easier one first. Then the hard one when we've trained the room to behave. Papers rustled. We need a staff representative. Someone who looks good on camera. Polite, sincere, grateful for the opportunity. Get the butler, Mr. Hawthorne said. He's furniture with diction. And for diversity optics, no optics. We hire professionals, not optics. Then allow me to be the professional who says we need optics, Celine replied, sweet as steel. The black maid. Amina. Ethan's body moved before his mind could leash it. He stepped into the doorway. No, Mr. Hawthorne finally glanced up. Did we knock before entering a room, or is that yet another basic instruction that slipped your education? She's not a prop, Ethan said. She is staff, his father said, returning his gaze to the screen. Staff demonstrate loyalty. That's the arrangement. Her arrangement is honesty, Ethan said, and the sentence felt like it had been hiding in his throat for a long time, waiting for a window. Celine intervened like a nurse between a proud patient and his pain. We're not asking her to lie, she said smoothly. We're asking her to share her positive experience. What if she doesn't have one? Ethan asked. Then we will help her remember differently, Mr. Hawthorne said, still scrolling, like memory was a lobby where he had bought the chairs. Don't, Ethan said, and the word came out something like a prayer that had borrowed a backbone. Mr. Hawthorne lifted his eyes fully then, and the room temperature cooled. I cannot be managing public relations and a child's tantrum simultaneously, he said. Pick one problem and become quiet. Pick a truth and live with it, Ethan said, surprising himself with the steadiness. You hired a consultant to teach the house to say sorry. Perhaps start upstairs. Get out, his father said, pleasant as poison. Ethan stepped back, not because the man had asked, but because he had felt the edge of a cliff in that voice, and decided not to show the drop his face yet. The controlled tour was scheduled for 11. That left an hour to make the house look like regret. Ms. Corinne deployed staff as if setting a table for a judgmental aunt, fluff pillows, erase fingerprints, straighten every frame that might reflect poverty. Amina was assigned to the study. She dusted the spines of books about philanthropy that smelled like tax strategy. Raina slipped in with eyes wide. He wants you for the interview, she whispered. And by he, I mean the man who pays for the air. He asked or ordered. Amina asked. When men like that ask, the punctuation is a period and a gun, Raina said, then bit her lip. I'm sorry. My mouth runs when my mind is afraid. Then let's slow it by carrying something heavy, Amina said. She lifted a stack of photo albums from the shelf, heavy leather, engraved corners, the kind of weight that teaches you what it costs to curate a life. A knock, brisk. Celine stepped in. Amina, she said, a vowel softened. 2 minutes. Amina set the albums down gently, as if history bruises. 2 minutes. We're inviting a journalist for a walk-in talk. You'll be on her route. She'll ask simple questions. How you like working here? How respected you feel? Nothing invasive. Respect is invasive when it's real, Amina said. Celine kept the smile. We're not building a courtroom. We're building context. There are 2 kinds of context, Amina said. One that tells the truth where it lives. One that takes the truth out for a haircut and returns it looking like someone else. Celine's smile cooled. I am very good at my job, Amina. So am I, Amina said softly. Celine exhaled through her nose like a person blowing out a candle that refuses to listen. Stay in the study at 11:30. Answer the questions. We will all be grateful. She left, and the air regained a degree of oxygen. Ethan appeared in the doorway, 5 minutes later, like a rumor reconsidered. She asked you. She instructed me, Amina said, cleaning a picture frame that held a boy with a dinosaur before a tutor took the dinosaur away. What would you like me to say to a stranger with a pen? Your truth, he said, and then made a face like he had said the wrong thing in a language exam. Your father will punish you, Amina said. It wasn't a threat, it was compassion with a forecast. He punishes whether I move or stay still, Ethan said. I'd rather move. She tilted her head. Careful. Movement feels like freedom until the hand that chooses it for you becomes a habit. He opened his mouth, but voice down the hall interrupted. They're here. The house stopped redefining itself and tried on a face like Sunday. The journalist was smaller than Amina expected, which is to say she had learned to make rooms taller by knowing where to stand. She wore flats. She carried her notebook like a hand should carry a hand. The cameraman behind her had the posture of someone who has watched too many men invent charm for an audience of edits. Welcome, Mr. Hawthorne said, his smile a practiced olive branch. We're very proud of our staff. As you'll see, the allegations don't reflect this home. They moved through rooms perfumed with preparation. Chef Lila offered cookies as if sugar could stand between truth and the door. The cameraman recorded wide shots of expensive kindness. At the study, the journalist paused, sensing gravity that had not been printed in the itinerary. Amina, Celine said brightly. We can skip names, the journalist said gently to Amina, pulling a pen that didn't look expensive. Tell me how long you've been here. 2 days, Amina said. Do you feel safe in this home? The room did a small thing with its breath. Yes, Amina said, and the word surprised even her. I feel safe in myself. The journalist's eyes smiled. That's not the question most people hear. It's the only one I can answer without lying, Amina replied. And the staff culture, the journalist asked. Do you feel respected? Amina could feel Celine's gaze shaping air. She could feel Mr. Hawthorne in the hall, close enough to check diction, far enough to claim he was not directing. She could feel the camera drink the scene. I feel seen, Amina said. By some. By others, I am furniture they are trying to teach to clap. The journalist did not blink. And the sun. Silence learned how to be a drum. Amina did not look toward the door, where Ethan was a shadow trying to be a boy. He is 17, she said. That is not an answer, the journalist said, gentle as gravel. It is today, Amina said. In a week, I might have a better one. Celine stepped in with a laugh that fit the space like a cushion. "We try not to put our newer team members in uncomfortable positions," she said. "Perhaps speak with Mr. Vale. He's been with us. I'd like to hear from her," the journalist said, not unkind. "If she's willing." Amina weighed the room. She thought of Malik's inhale when the inhaler works, how relief sounds like a decision. She thought of the sweater in the plastic bag. She thought of ethics clauses that make weather inside your mouth. "The sun has been cruel," she said, plain as a form. "Cruel in ways that felt practiced, not instinctual. That makes me more sad." The journalist's pen paused. Sad because instinct can be unlearned with love. Practice requires permission. Amina's voice did not rise. Permission requires someone else's silence. The cameraman's lens blinked. The room learned a new size. "Thank you," the journalist said softly. "That's enough." They moved on, leaving the study with a light that felt like weather after a storm decides to nap. Celine lingered long enough to keep the smile and drop it like a card onto the table. "A poetic answer," she said. "Not the one we planned." "I don't plan my mouth for other people's comfort," Amina said. "Perhaps you should," Celine said. "Comfort pays better." "Comfort lies," Amina replied. "Lies charge interest." Celine left without slamming anything. That's how professionals punish. Ethan stepped in, as if called. "You told the truth without telling the story," he said. "You can't tell a story that isn't yours," Amina said. "Not without stealing." He stood near the river stones on the shelf and touched one with his finger like it was a pet learning its name. "What would you steal if you had the chance?" "Time," she said, "but only from men who waste it pretending to be larger than people." He almost smiled. Almost. Then the almost was chased away by footsteps that learned to threaten while still polite. Mr. Hawthorne entered with a look that pretended to have no mood. Celine at his elbow, smile reinstalled. "A word," Mr. Hawthorne said to Amina, which is always a sentence with a basement. She followed him to the office. Ethan hovered at the door, a moth who had read a poem about fire, and decided to annotate it anyway. Inside, the office smelled like authority and paper. Mr. Hawthorne gestured to a chair that clearly cost more than money. "Sit." "I'm comfortable standing," Amina said. "Not in my office," he said. She sat, because rebellion is a resource you spend, not a reflex you waste. "You're new," he began, voice even. "You are not yet familiar with the choreography of this home. We do not humiliate each other in public." "I didn't humiliate anyone," Amina said. "You think the word cruel is not humiliation." His eyebrows performed surprise. "I think the act is." His eyes cooled further. "There is a difference between honesty and disloyalty." "Yes," she said. "One is expensive. The other is cheap. I prefer the expensive one because it ages better." He leaned back. "You have a way with sentences. It will not protect you from the consequences of confusing your role." "My role," she said, keeping her voice soft, "is to keep this house clean. Sometimes that means more than dust." "Fire her," he said to the air, which is to say to Celine, which is to say to everyone who isn't a person in rooms like this. "Wait," Ethan said from the doorway, stepping fully into the office before considering if he was allowed. "You fire her, and you confirm the narrative you're paying Celine to erase." "Mr. Hawthorne did not look at his son. He stared at Amina, as if trying to calculate what had been damaged, and if it could be replaced. "I do not reward insubordination." "You don't reward thought," Ethan said. "You buy compliance and call it culture." "Get out," Mr. Hawthorne said again, not raising his voice, because he doesn't need to. "You don't belong in this conversation." "I do," Ethan said, "because I am the conversation." For a moment nobody breathed. Then Mr. Hawthorne stood. Not quickly. Slow in the way large animals rise, reminding you of their weight. "Say what you think you're brave enough to say," he told his son. Ethan's mouth opened. No sound. He could feel childhood in his throat, clamping like a hand. He looked at Amina. She did not nod. She did not speak. She made her face a room with a chair in it, and a door that wasn't locked. He stepped into that room, in his own chest. "I have been cruel," he said. The words landed like heavy books. "Because I was taught control is care. Because it was easier to make people small than to be small. Because no one told me the difference between fear and power." Mr. Hawthorne's face did not change. "And now you think theater is transformation." "I think transformation starts in theater and then continues when the lights go out," Ethan replied, and his voice did not shake. "I think firing her would be proof of everything they're saying about us. And I think you know that. Celine watched them both like a rancher watching a sudden weather pattern. We can reposition, she said lightly. We can frame this as a listening moment. A commitment to staff voices. Amina stood. Do not turn me into a trope, she said. Do not use my refusal to sell your repent. Mr. Hawthorne's jaw cut the air. What do you want? He asked Amina, as if asking the price of a service he didn't wish to understand. I want your son to apologize without a microphone, she said. I want MS. Park's final paycheck to include the overtime you pretended not to see. I want the panic button in the hall to call an outside number, not your office. You will have none of those, he said. You will have a second chance. I don't need a second chance, she said. I need a first truth. He smiled then, a small, tired smile of a man who believes he has buried better people than this. You are fired. Silence entered the room through the air vent. Celine inhaled, ready to say the word optics in a new tone. Ethan stepped forward, past his own fear, onto a floor that had been waiting for a different sound. No, he said. No. Mr. Hawthorne repeated, as if scolding a dog for inventing a syllable. You can fire me, Ethan said, and in that second his face lost the expensive boy mask and showed the shape underneath. You can write me out of the will, turn off my cards, send me to Europe to pretend I'm studying art. You could do all the theater. But if you fire her, I go to the reporter and tell her everything I've done. Not to punish you, to tell the truth. And I will use my name. The room learned how to be a cliff again. Mr. Hawthorne laughed once. It sounded like a door closing. You won't. I will, Ethan said. Because if I don't, then who am I keeping safe? Not the people who work here. Not myself. The brand. And I'm tired of being a brand. Celine said Ethan's name softly, like saying a fever's name to make it lower. Think strategically. I am, he said. I'm choosing a story I can survive. Mr. Hawthorne looked at his son for an exact 3 seconds, the professional's measure of how long it takes to decide whether to purchase or punish. Then he turned to Celine. The maid stays, he said, and the word made shrank in a room like a plant deprived of light. We do not comment on internal HR matters. We release a statement about listening. We schedule a review with an outside consultant. And someone find MS. Park's file. And the panic button. Amina asked. We will discuss, he said, which in his mouth meant Barry. That's not a no, she said. Thank you. He looked at her like he had never seen a thank you used as a boundary before. Get out of my office, he said, to both of them, to everyone, to the mirror, to the day. They left. In the hallway, Ethan leaned against the wall and let his lungs argue. My hands are shaking, he said, fascinated, as if observing a rare bird. That's the body's way of setting down weight, Amina said. Does it stop, he asked. When you stop picking it back up, she said. He closed his eyes. For a second, he looked like the boy in the photograph with the dinosaur. I'm going to do it, he said, eyes still closed. Not the reporter. Not yet. Something else. I'm going to apologize to someone without an audience. She nodded. Then start with Ms. Park. She won't want to hear my voice, he said. Then apologize to the sweater, Amina said. Sometimes the proxy is all we get before the person trusts us with their hurt. He almost laughed. You talk like you're older than the house. I talk like I've learned how to live without permission, she said. Evening approached with a sky the color of lawsuits. The statement went out at 5, regret language, and the promise of reviews. Online, it was received like rain on a roof that had already learned to leak. The anonymous account posted a new message 15 minutes later. Stop practicing apology for cameras. Practice it for the person you've erased. In the laundry room, the unclaimed items shelf held its silent courtroom. The pale blue sweater sat in its bag, folded into itself like a frightened lung. Ethan walked in alone. The machines hummed like a prayer with poor breath control. He stood in front of the shelf and stared. He took the bag down and held it, arms loose, like he understood he didn't deserve the weight, and held it anyway. His mouth moved. Words. No cameras. No father. No Celine. No script. I am sorry, he said to a sweater and the woman who used to wear it, and the part of himself that learned cruelty, like piano scales. I am sorry I made you small, so I could feel big. I am sorry I learned to look at pain like inventory. I am sorry no one taught me the difference between a rule and a kindness. I am sorry I didn't stop when I saw you were scared. I am sorry for the nights I made long because I could. I am sorry no one on this side said the word sorry to you first. He swallowed. He touched the plastic through which softness could be seen but not felt. "I don't know what to do," he whispered, "but I want to learn." He placed the bag back on the shelf as if it belonged to a person who might come collect it now that the house had heard a sentence it couldn't edit. When he turned, Amina was in the doorway. She had not been there when the words began. She had arrived with the last one and stayed because leaving would have been theft. "I didn't mean for you to hear," he said, cheeks coloring like a boy not used to heat, that is in anger. "I wasn't the one who needed to," she said. He stood there, uncertain of his own edges. "What happens now?" "Now," she said, "you do something harder. You don't correct people when they tell the story of what you did to them." He nodded. Then he did a smaller thing that felt enormous. He stepped aside to let her pass first. Night came with headlines and the slow creep of board members texting their concerns. Inside the house, staff moved like creatures who have adapted to multiple climates in a single day. Chef Lila left a loaf of bread wrapped in a towel on the counter with a note that said, "For whoever needs warm." Moreau adjusted the angle of a camera in the hall so it would capture more ceiling than soul. Mr. Vale changed the batteries in 1,000 small devices because details matter when the truth is counting. And somewhere between 1 hour and the next, while the statement sank and the comments learned new synonyms for accountability, Amina took the updated addendum, the one Celine had promised to revise, and read it under the lamp in her bunk. It had new words about respect and dialogue and process. It still had the old weight. At the bottom, she wrote again in neat, small letters, "I will not disparage. I will not lie. I will not pretend." She left the paper and signed and slid it, once again, under a door that has never known how to open first. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. A video. She pressed play. Grainy hallway footage from 3 weeks ago. Ms. Park carrying laundry at 2:07 a.m., Ethan blocking the doorway, speaking too softly for the mic. Ms. Park stepping aside, eyes down. His hand not touching, but near enough to count as touch to anyone who has learned the radius of threat. The video stopped. A text. I kept a copy. It's time. Amina stared at the tiny screen holding a big truth and felt the house till the degree that meant furniture would slide if people didn't brace. She looked up at the ceiling and addressed the night like a witness. "So we move," she whispered. Down the hall, Ethan lay on his back with the broken orange string beside his pillow. He stared at the power light blinking blue. He could feel Act 1 of himself ending and did not yet know what Act 2 required. He knew only that the next day would demand a kind of courage that doesn't look like speaking loudly. It looks like not interrupting. It looks like standing next to a woman who refuses to be furniture and letting the room decide who is human. In the dark, 2 truths learned how to stand without a wall. The boy who decided to be small on purpose, and the woman who had never needed permission to be large. The house, which had built a career on swallowing sound, realized with a shiver that it had just heard a beginning it could not digest. The morning arrived with the fierce clarity that follows a storm pretending to be sleep. The house smelled like bleach and worry. Somewhere in the service corridor, a dropped spoon rang like a bell. In the laundry room, the pale blue sweater sat in its plastic like a witness under a thin blanket. By 7, the anonymous account had posted the hallway video. The time stamp, the pause, the near touch, the air shaped into intimidation. The caption was a scalpel. He learned this. He practiced this. The comments were a courthouse. Names piled on names, half of them guesses, half of them truths delivered by people who had moved through houses like this and learned the weight of a boy's shadow. Celine's phone was already glowing with executives who said situation, and lawyers who said exposure like a rash. She had 4 plans before coffee. Plan A, deny the video's context. Plan B, challenge authenticity. Plan C, apologize decisively, fire strategically. Plan D, sue slowly until truth became too expensive to maintain. Mr. Hawthorne chose Plan A out loud and Plan C in his inbox. Draft 2 statements, he told Celine, pacing the office like a patient storm. 1 for now, 1 for when people decide the first wasn't enough. People don't decide, Celine said pleasantly. Narratives do. She gestured toward the ceiling, the cameras, the web. This one's hungry. Ethan found the video at the top of his notifications and didn't press play because his bones remembered it without pixels. He sat on the edge of his bed, the broken orange string in his palm, and counted his heartbeats until the number felt like a language he could speak without stuttering. He stood, put on shoes that had been polished by someone else's day, and went to find Amina. She was in the staff kitchen, hands in soapy water, washing a saucepan that didn't need washing. Chef Lila pretended to inventory herbs to resist putting her arms around a woman who's already carrying too much. Mr. Vale stood at the doorway like punctuation. They posted it, Ethan said uselessly. Yes, Amina said, not turning from the sink. The smell of courage is always a little like fear. He took a step into the kitchen like a boy walking into a classroom where he had failed a test and the teacher had left the door open anyway. What do I do? You already did the first thing, Amina said. You didn't deny what you saw. I want to say something, but anything I say will be taken apart with tools I don't know how to name. Then don't say it to cameras, Mr. Vale offered. Say it to people. Ms. Park, Ethan said. The name might have been a wound or a salve, he wasn't sure yet. She won't answer my calls. Would you? Amina asked. He held the string tighter until his fingerprints learned its shape. No, then right, Amina said. Not an excuse. Not a defense. A letter. If she never reads it, it still teaches your hand who you are when nobody grades the sentence. His throat worked. He nodded. Okay. Also, Chef Lila added, voice low like a lullaby wearing armor, eat something. Leverage is easier to hold with sugar in your blood. He took half a slice of bread and set it back down, the act of a boy practicing consent with himself. He left the kitchen and the warm and stepped back into the house's cold idea of day. At 9, the board members started calling the father. Board members don't call, they summon. Today they called. Mr. Hawthorne took the call standing, the animal move of a predator who refuses to be seen as prey. He said review a lot. He said family matter less. He never said hurt. He told Celine to schedule a press conference, then didn't like the sound of his own command and changed it to a controlled statement with limited questions in a room I own. The panic button in the hall suddenly mattered. For years it had been a decoration disguised as safety. It pinged an internal number that rang on a desk staffed by politeness. After the video, Raina stood in the corridor and stared at the button with a face that knew how useless became dangerous. If I push it, she said quietly to Amina, it tells on me before it saves me. We'll change it, Amina said. How? Raina asked, half laughing. We'll lift the whole house. Just one wire, Amina said. One line that stops going in and starts going out. In the security room, the guard, Hector, dog-eared by night shifts, looked at the screen and then at the people in front of it. I didn't sign for war, he said. I signed for door buzzers. You signed to be a person who notices, Amina said. That's all this is. Notice where the wire leads. Help it lead somewhere else. He rubbed the back of his neck. You realize you're making me brave on a Thursday. I'm making you useful, she said gently. Bravery's headline. Usefulness is the story. By noon, the journalist who had toured yesterday called Celine. On the record, she asked. Off, Celine said automatically. Off the record in houses like this means on the chessboard. We have other staff willing to talk, the journalist said. Former and current. Disgruntled, Celine offered. Human, the journalist corrected. I'd like comment from the Sun. He is a minor, Celine said. 17, the journalist said. Old enough to make habits. Young enough to learn. Celine gazed at Mr. Hawthorne's door, like a stage manager calculating pyro. We'll get back to you, she said, which is media code for we are hoping for a different universe between now and then. In the corridor outside the office, Ethan waited for a knock that wouldn't be answered. He texted Ms. Park's number again and wrote, simply, I am sorry. He didn't add commas or context. He didn't send a paragraph that might be interpreted as design. He pressed send and felt nothing change and everything move. A push notification lit his screen. A second video. Not him. His father. A different hallway. A caterer carrying a tray. Mr. Hawthorne's hand, the way it occupied space like ownership. The audio picked up one sentence, more than enough. If you want to keep working in this town, you will understand me without my having to explain. The words were not loud, but fear doesn't need volume when it's fluent. The post caption read, Power graduates into menace when unaccountable. The comments were lava under ice. Celine cursed softly, a beautiful word in the wrong mouth. Who has these? She demanded of the air. Who else has these? Everyone, Amina said. Everyone who needed insurance to pay for rent. Shut it down, Mr. Hawthorne said, ignoring the problem of scale. Call counsel. Call favors. There's a faster call, Amina said. To who? He asked, disdain dripping. To the part of yourself that knows what you sound like when you're not pretending this house is a church, Amina said. He looked at her as if he might admire her, if he were allowed to. You mistake me for a person interested in introspection. I don't mistake you, she said. I am inviting you. He turned away. Celine. The statement. Now, the controlled statement happened at 2. A lectern appeared in the family room. The ring lights returned with their steady sunlight that forgave nobody. Staff were told to stay out of the frame and to support operations, which means to make camera angles look like empathy. A few journalists, chosen for their willingness to be polite, were allowed in. Mr. Hawthorne stood at the lectern and delivered an arrangement of sorrow and sternness, the kind performance money learns from media coaches who were never allowed to cry at work. He said deeply and fully, and commitment, and investigate, and values. He did not say, I'm sorry. He did not say, I hurt someone. He did not say, my son learned this here. When questions were allowed, a hand went up that did not belong to the invited list. The earlier journalist had managed to get in. Her voice was pleasant, which is how knives travel across nations. Will your son speak? She asked. He is a minor, Mr. Hawthorne said smoothly. He is undergoing private reflection. Will you speak to the fact that staff describe your home as punitive, that your panic buttons route internally to your office? Our safety measures are robust, he said, smiling without teeth. We protect our team. Do you think protection without trust is surveillance? She asked. He rephrased his smile to a new setting. Next question. From the back of the room, a different voice rose. Not a journalist. A woman, shaking, not with fear but with velocity. Ms. Park. Her hair pulled back like grown storms. She held up her phone. The screen showed the video everyone had already seen. She didn't need to play it. The room went still around the shape of her. I came for my pay, she said. And I came for his eyes. She did not point at Ethan. She did not let him hide in the edges. She looked directly at Mr. Hawthorne. You taught him this. Security moved instinctively, the choreography of removing inconvenient persons. They hesitated at Celine's micro-shake of the head. Removing a woman on camera would trend more quickly than any statement could glue back together. Ethan stepped forward before anyone could move him back. He had not been invited. He had not been trained for this. No one had prepped him with words you sit in a mirror and test until they sound like sincerity. He stood near the lectern and said to the room and the internet and the house and the boy inside his own chest, I did it. It was not a strategy. It was a sentence with weight. I did it, he said again, because repetition is how truth gathers muscle. I was cruel. I wanted to feel powerful. I didn't want to be small. I am sorry. The room waited for more. But sometimes more is just smaller truth dressed up. He let it be enough for now. Off the record, a journalist called, forgetting herself. Ethan said. On the record. Mr. Hawthorne's face didn't move. The cameras did. They leaned in like flowers toward a sun that might burn. I learned it here, Ethan said, and the word here felt heavier than the ceiling. But I chose it. That choice is mine. Ms. Park's shoulders shook once, not tears, more like a body loosening its fist. She didn't smile. She didn't forgive on command. She lowered her phone and said, Pay me. All of it. And fix the button. Yes, Ethan said, looking at her, not at his father. Today. Mr. Hawthorne spoke the only sentence left that can pretend to manage a wildfire. We will be issuing further comment after review. No, Ethan said softly, and it wasn't defiance. It was correction. We will be issuing checks. It wasn't a plan. It was a pivot. But sometimes pivots are the only way to avoid falling into the hole you have dug with your own verbs. The controlled statement ended itself. Journalists were escorted out with a gentleness that says, we know where you parked. Celine began composing emails so quickly her fingers stopped being individual things. Board members called again, voices tighter. Donors wrote paragraphs that used the word disappointed like a sword in a velvet dress. In the office, the father and the son, and the consultant, and the maid took positions that looked like a compass refusing to agree on north. You think you're brave, Mr. Hawthorne said to his son, each syllable a brick in a wall he had built out of $10,000 hours. You're naive. I was, Ethan said. Yesterday. You have cost us millions. I cost us less than the truth would have, asked to hide. Celine stood between them like a referee who loves the game more than the players. We have an opportunity, she said, eyes moving fast. Not to perform contrition, but to architect it. If we move quickly, we can— No architects, Amina said quietly. Just carpenters. Build one door and leave it unlocked. What door? Mr. Hawthorne snapped, tired of metaphors. To third-party ombuds for staff, Amina said. External reporting. Real power to intervene. Real budget. Replace the panic button routing by end of day. Announce back pay for overtime. Publish the number. Apologize without the word if. Do it on paper and with checks. Do it now. Celine tilted her head. It will look like we're admitting fault. We are, Ethan said, and the sentence landed on his father's desk like an uninvited guest who refuses to leave. Mr. Hawthorne sat. He did it the way men sit when the performance of standing has stopped winning them anything. He looked at the window. He looked at his son. He looked at the woman who refused to be furniture. He found the spot on his desk where his ring wore a circle into expensive wood. He pressed his thumb into it like a rosary. Ms. Park is to be paid, he said finally, each word dragged across gravel. All of it. With interest. The button. Change the routing. Today. Celine. Draft the ombud's language. No adjectives. Numbers and names. He lifted his eyes to Ethan. And you, apology in writing. Delivered. Not posted. Ethan nodded once. It felt like a word his body had been waiting to learn. It won't save you, Mr. Hawthorne added, as if refusing his son easy oxygen. It will let me breathe, Ethan said, as if refusing his father the monopoly on air. A corridor away, Hector unscrewed a panel with hands that had been hired for posture, not wires. Amina knelt beside him, steady as a patient. They followed the line like a map that finally made sense, red to the office, green to the gatehouse. They clipped, reconnected, tested. Hector pressed the button. The phone on the desk down the hall didn't ring. An outside line did. It's out, Hector said, a grin surprising his face. It goes out. Raina exhaled a laugh that sounded like a small animal making it across a road. We made a door, she said, touching the wall like a friend. By dusk, checks were printed. Old hours became new money. Chef Lila baked 2 loaves, one for Ms. Park, one for the shelf where staff leave offerings to each other that management mistakes for snacks. Mr. Vale found a florist willing to make a bouquet that didn't look like apology, trying to buy forgiveness. He chose lilies and eucalyptus and something green that smelled like beginnings. Ethan wrote. He didn't ask anyone to read it. He didn't workshop it. He wrote on paper with a pen that bled slightly on the edges, like truth does when it finally touches air. He wrote her name without the honorific and then corrected himself and added Ms. He wrote, I am sorry first, and I learned second, and I will try last. He added money in the envelope not as a bribe, but as rent he owed to the part of the world he had occupied without paying. He asked Amina to come with him to deliver it. Not to protect him, but to supervise his courage. They walked to the gate in the blue of early evening, where the day loosens its tie and decides whether to be kind. Ms. Park waited, not because she trusted the house, but because the house owed her, and she had decided to collect standing up. Ethan handed her the envelope. He didn't try to meet her eyes, and then did anyway. I am sorry, he said, the sentence unadorned. She took the envelope. She did not open it. I don't forgive you, she said in the tone of someone who takes the time to mean the thing she says. He swallowed. Okay. She looked at Amina. A transaction passed between women that money cannot decode. Amina nodded once. Not permission, not instruction, acknowledgement. Fix the house, Ms. Park said, tucking the envelope into a bag that had carried too many evenings. Not for me. I don't have to live in it anymore. We started, Amina said. Start again tomorrow, Ms. Park replied, and turned and left, and did not look back, and the cameras, for once, learned how to lower their eyes. Night gathered. The statement went out with numbers and names, and no adjectives. The panic button routing changed. A hotline was posted by the door where schedules live, like commandments. Back pay cleared. Staff looked at the zeros and felt their throats uncoil a fraction. Online, the narrative did not flip into praise. It shifted into watchfulness. That's as much as the world gives to houses like this when they learn to say, we did, before we will. Later, when the lights were low and the performances slept, Ethan sat on the staircase where he used to drink water without drinking. He rested his elbows on his knees and looked at the spot where Amina had taught him to stand in the harsh light. He did not feel good. He did not feel absolved. He felt at the beginning of something that had no marketing plan. Amina joined him, not close, not far. She sat 2 steps below, like memory locating its chair. "He'll make you pay," she said, not unkind. "He already has," he said. "The cost is different now." "Good." He rubbed his palm over the orange string. "I don't know how to be someone else yet." "You don't have to," she said. "Be someone honest. It's smaller and heavier." He nodded, and then he did the smallest, heaviest thing. He turned his head and said, "Thank you for not letting me use you as a shield." "You are not my enemy," she said. "You were my lesson. Now you are my work." "And you?" he asked. "What are you now?" "Not fired," she said, which made both of them laugh in the quiet way people laugh when they are not competing with the world. In the laundry room, the unclaimed items shelf looked different without changing at all. The pale blue sweater still rested in plastic. A sticky note had appeared beside it in Mr. Vale's careful script, to be returned. To whom it belongs. Under it, another note in Chef's handwriting, warm, kept here. Hector, tape a new label under the panic button, outside line. He stood back and took a photo. He sent it to his sister with no explanation. She replied with a single heart, which is not how hearts work, but love doesn't care about accuracy when it recognizes a door. Celine sat in the office, alone, and stared at the screen where her draft statements multiplied like polite regrets. She deleted them. She wrote an email to a friend at a different firm. "When did you know you were working for Wrong Story?" The friend replied, "When I started calling people optics in my sleep." Celine closed the laptop. She looked at her reflection in the dark glass and did not recognize the woman who believed that adjectives could save a life. Mr. Hawthorne stood by a window and considered the shape of his power. He pressed his palm against the glass, a gesture he would deny under oath. He did not apologize. He did, however, imagine a world where he might have to learn how. The imagining hurt. He labeled the hurt rage because that made it easier to carry. The house breathed. It had not forgiven. It had not repented. It had changed a wire, printed checks, opened a number to the outside. Sometimes that's how institutions kneel, not with prayers, but with infrastructure. Amina lay in her bunk and texted Malik, "Today we made a door." He replied with a photo of his homework and a voice note that said, "Mama, I told Ms. Nora that my mom fixes rich people's houses. She said you're a superhero." Amina listened to the voice note twice and laughed without making a sound. She typed, "Superheroes are just tired people who keep choosing the heavy things. Sleep. I love you." Upstairs, Ethan turned the broken string in his hand until the roughness left a circle on his skin. He pressed his thumb into it the way a man presses into a worn place on a desk. He whispered to a room that finally felt less like a camera and more like a room, "Tomorrow I will be smaller and better." He didn't know that in the morning another post would rise, a ledger, names and hours, and a pattern of unpaid overtime that could become a class action if someone said the word. He didn't know that his father would calculate which pieces of himself he could afford to sell to keep the lights on. He didn't know that the door they built today would be used by a woman next week to save her throat from a sentence. He didn't know, and that ignorance felt less like blindness and more like a promise. There will be more to do. The chandelier hummed. The panic line purred to a number outside. The house did something it had not done in years. It slept without staging sleep. It let the people inside it rest not because a camera asked for a shot, but because mercy, once invited, insists on turning off a light. Understood. I'll keep it completely within YouTube's content safety limits. No explicit violence, no discriminatory language, nothing sensational about harm. Only emotional consequence, redemption, and moral clarity in BUP's cinematic competitor style. He shattered every heart that tried to care for him, until a quiet maid with eyes full of mercy made him remember what love was supposed to feel like. That sentence, once whispered only by a narrator, had now found its proof. Morning came slower than usual. The mansion's windows, long trained to reflect only sky, began to show faces, cleaners, reporters, neighbors walking their dogs. The house had lost its privilege of secrecy. Ethan stood at the balcony railing, phone in hand, reading the new headline again. Hawthorne Group faces internal inquiry over staff mistreatment. Below it, a single photograph, Amina walking through the gate, eyes forward, unflinching. She wasn't smiling, and that was the point. The world had learned to trust the unsmiling. Inside, staff moved quietly, not out of fear this time, but from exhaustion that was finally honest. For the first time, Ms. Corinne had removed the laminated schedule. The wall looked bare, like a wound breathing fresh air. Chef Lila was baking bread again, the kind that doesn't need cameras to smell holy. Mr. Vale polished silver, not for perfection, but for reflection. He wanted to see the faces that had survived here. Raina hummed, something close to joy, off-key, and contagious. In the library, Ethan drafted letters. Real ones. Paper. Ink. Names. One to Ms. Park, one to every staff member he could remember who had left under silence. His handwriting looked young, which it was a reminder that even sincerity trembles when learning its first steps. His father entered without knocking. A habit. The last of them. Your apology tour is trending, Mr. Hawthorne said, voice tired from losing arguments to public opinion. They're calling you the conscience of the brand. I'm not the brand, Ethan said, eyes still on the page. I'm the caution. You've humiliated this family. I described it accurately. Mr. Hawthorne paused. His suit was perfect, but his eyes were tired in a way that no tailor can fix. You think you've won something? I think I've stopped losing myself, Ethan said. The older man stepped closer, lowering his voice. Do you believe these people care about you? When the story fades, they'll forget. Redemption isn't a business model. I know, Ethan said. That's why I'm not selling it. A silence stood between them, not hostile, just unfamiliar. The kind of quiet where pride meets its own reflection and doesn't like what it sees. Downstairs, Amina was meeting with a representative from a labor council. Her presence in the living room felt like sunlight visiting a cave. She spoke clearly, calmly, outlining what needed to change if the house wanted to survive: written contracts, external audits, an independent helpline. The rep took notes. Mr. Vale nodded like someone recognizing a language he'd once forgotten. Ethan entered mid-meeting, not to interrupt, but to listen. When she finished, he said, "We'll do it." Amina turned toward him. "We means who?" "Everyone's still drawing a salary because silence paid well," he said. "Including me." "Good," she said, "because change that depends on one voice is still another kind of silence." Outside, trucks were arriving, not police, not paparazzi, but moving vans. Amina's contract ended that week, and she had chosen not to renew. "I came here to work," she told Raina the night before. "I leave here to rest." Rumor said she was going to start her own agency, one that trained domestic workers in legal rights and self-advocacy. She didn't correct the rumor. Some rumors deserved to come true. The day she left, the staff lined the corridor quietly. Not a ceremony, just presence. She carried one small suitcase, the same navy head wrap, and the stillness that had once unsettled marble. Ethan stood at the staircase, the same place where their story began, no glass of water this time, only his hands, empty but finally steady. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" she asked. "For teaching me that care isn't weakness." She smiled small enough. "It never was. You were." He laughed, not loud but real. "Will you come back?" "No," she said. "Houses like this need to learn to breathe without supervision." He nodded. "Then maybe I'll visit where you're going." "Only if you can enter as a volunteer," she said. "Not as a guest." She walked down the marble steps, each heel sound marking the end of something unholy. The gate opened, not electronically but by hand. Hector had insisted the motor stay off that morning. Doors should remember they belong to people, he'd said. When the gate closed, Ethan stayed where he was. "Mr. Hawthorne appeared behind him, looking through the glass. "She'll sell her story," he muttered. "She doesn't need to," Ethan said. "She lived it right." Weeks turned into a rhythm of rebuilding. The Hawthorne Group announced new board oversight, external audits, a foundation for domestic worker education, part amends, part survival. Online, the noise quieted, replaced by think pieces and fatigue. People moved on. Institutions reinvented themselves. That's how the world works. But inside the house, small miracles persisted. Staff meetings began with first names. Pay slips arrived on time. The panic line connected to an actual emergency desk. Ms. Corinne retired, finally exhaling. Raina took her place, but changed the title. Staff coordinator, not head housekeeper. Language matters. Ethan turned 19. On his birthday, he visited Amina's new center in the city, a converted church basement filled with folding chairs and posters about fair labor. Children's laughter spilled from an after-school corner. She was there, teaching a workshop on financial literacy. He waited until she finished before approaching. "You did it," he said. "We did," she corrected. "I just gave it an address." He handed her an envelope, a donation in his name, but in her program's control. She hesitated. "Are you sure?" "Yes," he said. "I don't need the money. I need to keep remembering." She accepted it, not for charity, but for partnership. "Then remember this too," she said. "Forgiveness isn't a gift we give others. It's a skill we teach ourselves so we don't rot." He nodded. "I'm still learning." "Good," she said. "Stay teachable. Power dies when it stops listening." That night, he walked back through the city. Smaller buildings, honest lights, people arguing and laughing in the same breath. He realized he liked the sound. The air didn't smell like disinfectant. It smelled like food, sweat, rain, life. When he reached home, the mansion looked different. Not softer, but quieter, humbled. The lights in the upper windows were off, like the building itself was practicing humility. He went inside, wrote a final note, and left it on the grand piano. "To whoever works here next, if you ever feel unseen, press the button. It rings to someone who listens now." He placed the broken orange string bracelet beside the note, tied in a loose knot, whole again in spirit, if not in thread. Then he turned off the main hall light, the one that had never been off in 17 years. Darkness didn't scare him anymore. It just meant rest. Weeks later, Amina received a letter with no return address. Inside, a photograph of the mansion from the outside, windows open, curtains moving like breath, and a line written on the back in careful script, "Mercy can live in glass after all." She smiled, folded the photo into her notebook, and kept teaching. He shattered every heart that tried to care for him, until a quiet maid with eyes full of mercy made him remember what love was supposed to feel like. But mercy isn't magic. It's work. It's showing the powerful what they forgot, showing the broken that healing isn't obedience, and showing every silent room that dignity makes its own sound. In the end, the Hawthorne mansion still stands. But the people inside walk differently now. They look up when they speak. They hold the light longer. And sometimes on quiet nights, when the new staff breathe against the marble, the house almost sounds human.